Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about drawing the human head, keeping in mind the bone structure. So you can see here this view of the skull. There's a few things that make it easier to draw the human head, especially from your imagination, and it's knowing the bone structure. So really having a sense that there is a skull underneath all the surface details, and the eye sockets are halfway down. That is a huge, you can see on here, that's a huge factor in drawing accurately, is knowing where everything is placed. And understanding that the shape of the head really, it changes the way it looks depending on the angle. So you can see here, I try to visualize and keep in mind when I'm drawing someone what their head would look like from other angles. So it's really easy to forget about the complex geometry of the jaw, for instance, and how it really juts out right here. So our heads are not actually round. The top part is, but not the whole thing, because then you have the jaw coming down here. And just a few other views. You can see it's easier if you look at an actual skull in real life, but just noticing where it's hinged and everything like that. So you can actually draw from a photo. Say this is the photo I'm going to use. Okay, you can draw from a photo without really understanding the bone structure. It's when you're trying to draw from your imagination or life that it gets hard. But if you draw from a photo, you can actually learn a few really simple rules about just perceiving visual relationships in the picture plane and noticing the shadows, drawing the shadows that you see. And you can draw anything that way at all, like especially if you know a little bit of perspective. But something flat like this, it's just a matter of perceiving where the lights and darks are and kind of visually noting where everything is in relation to everything else. So there's just a when you're drawing a face, it takes quite a bit of concentration. So I try to always start out with my workstation just how I want. Everything's in order. I have my pencil sharpened. I have the pencil that I like. That's important. The paper that I like. I just remember to breathe well and usually listen to some music that I really enjoy. And it's great to draw from photos. There's nothing wrong with drawing from photos, and sometimes that's all you have. Ideally, when you get into really being serious about drawing and you want to do it more, and you want to draw from your imagination and just learn more technically, try to draw from life, but it's not always possible, and you can learn so much just drawing from photos. So I'm going to show you how to draw just kind of a basic approach to drawing faces from this photo. I like this photo, and that is important. You don't want to draw from a photo that you don't like. So you can either take one you enjoy or just look around and find one. It's like from an old photography book. So, okay, first things first, I start out with the shape of the head. I kind of try to draw from my shoulder and my elbow, and I try to keep my wrist as stiff as possible and my shoulder and elbow really loose, because if you get into fussy little drawing, you're going to cramp up your hand and it's going to look like too short of lines. You don't want that. You want long fluid lines, and you want to be able to freely move around the paper so you can just kind of have a sense of where everything goes and get that energetic type of line. So I often start with the shape of the head, and I'm going to draw really lightly at first. Moving my arm, trying to get this oval shape, which I will adjust later, and I'm trying to keep it about the same size on the page as I have on the picture, because just for the sake of drawing accurately, you do not have to do this, but it's easier for beginners. Like if you're not super confident about drawing faces, maybe try to draw the whole composition so you know you can measure where everything is in relation to the edges of the paper. So the eyes are halfway down. I'm going to do a little mark here, which I'll erase later, showing where that is, and I'm even going to do a crosshairs here for the nose. I'm going to measure kind of where the bottom of the nose is and where the mouth is too. Mouth's about halfway down from between the nose and the chin bottom. The eyes usually have about an eye width in between them too. Sounds like I'm saying everybody is the same, but those are general guidelines, and when you're drawing a face from the front, they really do help. It really helps. So I'm keeping in mind, like, I'm going to draw the shadows, and the shape of the eye and the way I draw is really determined by the eye sockets, and they create all this shading. So if you squint at the picture, you really squint at the picture, you see a very recognizable face pattern of light and dark. So our eyes are attuned to seeing faces everywhere, and we instantly can perceive a face even if it's completely abstracted and simplified. You probably can't see what I'm doing yet very well because I start out really, really lightly. And she has kind of larger eyes and kind of downturned eyebrows. Sometimes I'll even try to notice as I draw, what are the distinguishing features of this face? Because every face is a little different. So I might say, well, her mouth turns down a little bit, and it's kind of small, and her chin is also a little bit small. Girls and women they tend to have like smaller chins than men. So I also noticed her hairline is really low. It goes way down here. Even though I can tell her hair goes up high, I'm going to bring this hair down so that I can show how her hair really is coming down. It's starting to come together a little bit. Now, I do not believe in outlining each feature with pencil. You'll see that on beginning draw, people who are just beginning to draw, outlining everything, including the lips. But if you notice, the way lips are defined is not like a line around the outside of the lips. Like nobody has an outline around the outside of their lips. So the way to define that is just the shadows that you see. So the upper lip is always way more shaded than the bottom lip because it's angled inwards, so the light doesn't hit it as much, unless it's like weird light coming from below, but we're not going to deal with that right now. So now I see her chin also has the shading. I'm just going to draw the shading that I see. So here's his eye. So yeah, the eyes are really dark, so I can fill those in, but I'm leaving that little glint there. So there are some lines. There's a line of her eyelashes, of course, but underneath, it's not so much a line as it is a faint shadow that fades outwards. She has sort of sad eyes. I'm going to draw this. The line above, again, it's not really a line, it's just a shadow that is kind of fades away at the corners. You can see that. Eyebrow. And then I notice, especially if I squint, I really notice the shadow of her eye socket that kind of connects her eyebrow and her eye here. Still kind of going a little faint so that if I need to adjust anything later, I can. There's the side of her cheek. I won't do every detail, but just enough for you to see where I'm going with this. Her nose is sort of upturned, so I see this nostril. It's so fun to draw faces. It just never gets old. This one is also visible, but it's also surrounded by a lot of dark. I'm being a little messy and quick here, but it makes a big difference in your drawing what your pencil quality mark making is. So trying to keep my marks a little bit consistent here. I could be more artful about it. If I wanted to take more time, I could do more marks like this, for instance, where they're a little bit more precise instead of smudgy. Here, you can see nobody has like something on their face that's this shape. It's just the shadow. And why does she have the shadow there? Because of her eye socket. So this is gonna, following the photo keeps it consistent with the lighting that was falling on her face at the time of this photo. So here we have this other eye. I love drawing eyes. They show a lot of personality. And an important thing to note when you're drawing eyes is that the white of the eye is not pure white. It really should fade out into, it should darken at the corners, because yes, an eyeball is white, but it's also in shadow. So even on this one, there's a little shadow, especially at the corners, because as the eyeball is round, as it recedes away from the light into the corners, it gets darker. So that's going to give it that more rounded quality. This is kind of a realistic style, so some people like to draw not so realistically, and I totally get that, but it is very important and helpful to learn how to draw realistically in order to develop your own style of, say, illustration. Like if you're into anime or whatever, the best anime artists can draw realistically first, and that informs their ability to do these awesome characters from their imagination. So I'm just noticing every shadow I create is helping to define the shape of her face. She is completely shaded over here on this side, and if I really want to take a lot of time, I will just shade in the area around her face really, really, really dark. But that's kind of the last thing to do. I'm noticing where the shadow ends, because that's going to determine how the dimensions of her face appear. She has a rounded face, so the shadows, how they are on her face, show that roundedness. So I want them to be really accurate. And honestly, hardly any of the left side of her face is as light as the other side, and it gradually gets darker. So darkening and darkening. Time consuming but fun, I think, to do the shading. Satisfying, you get immediate results. So I don't want to forget about her jaw. That's important. So you see underneath, it's going to be even darker because her jaw shades her neck. All of this should be shaded, and I'm kind of just going around the areas that I'm noticing right now, but there are a lot of shadows on her face. Wow. And I'm not doing it nearly dark enough yet. But I kind of like to go all over first before I get into making it really dark. Sort of evenly darken it as I go. Some people don't. Some people just go straight in with the darks. This pencil's not very dark, you can notice. Just a good old number 2. I could do one of the 6 Bs. Those are the darkest pencils. The Bs, the sets I have that are Bs and Hs, the Bs are darker. They get darker the higher the number, and then the Hs, they get lighter the higher the number. So a 2B is a good semi-dark. Okay. Well, that gives you the basics. Drawing this face. So I could just go on and start adding all the other. We should compare it. I'm very far from being finished here, and you can see it's still way lighter. But I'm getting the basic idea. Yep. Cool. Okay. That's enough for today.